The 19th century contained many of the significant events in the Philippine history that contributed to the birth and maturity of our sense of nationalism. Several movements were established following the abuse and racial discrimination experienced by Filipinos under the friars, who mixed political and religious activities as a means of gaining control. Among them is the Secularization movement.
In the Philippine context, secularization meant nationalizing the Catholic Church by replacing the friars with native secular priests. This was a response to the Spanish friars, who were perceived as obstacles to education, progress, and freedom.
Back then, there were two types of priests that served the Catholic Church. First were the secular priests. Secular priests did not belong to any religious order. They were assigned to run the parishes under the supervision of the bishop. Second were the regular priests. Regular priests' main task was to spread Christianity. They belonged to the congregations of the Jesuits, Dominicans, Franciscans, Recollects, and Augustinians. Issues on secularization started when regular priests who were given parish assignments refused to be visited by bishops, firmly insisting that they are not under their jurisdiction. The bishops, on the other hand, argued that it is their duty to check on the parish administration. Because of this, the regular priests threatened to resign from parish assignments, which in turn will cause a delay on the spread of Christianity.
Based on the decree by Archbishop Basilio Sancho de Santa Justa concerning the expulsion of the Jesuits in 1769, one can deduce that he supported the diocese's authority over parishes and accepted the resignation of the regular priests. By royal decree, Simon de Anda became Governor General in 1770, and on the 9th day of November 1774, he implemented the secularization of the Philippines. Parochial administration was transferred from the regular friars to the secular priests. The Archbishop assigned secular priests to the parishes, but because there were not enough of them, Filipino secular priests were ordained to fill in the vacancies. Regular priests persisted this policy as they deemed Filipinos unfit for priesthood. According to them, Filipinos lacked education and experience and turned it into an issue of racial hierarchy about Filipinos having brown skin and being Indios, who occupy the lowest class in the society, an inferior race with limited intelligence. This was an obvious display of discrimination.
The Spanish government hardened its position out of fear that the Filipino secular priests would one day lead revolts against Spain, and they weren't exactly wrong about that.
Friars began to increase again in 1825, and by the 8th of June 1826, the secularization policy of 1774 was overturned by the Spanish government led by Ferdinand VII. He ordered the return of the parish of Malate to the Augustinians and the restitution to the religious orders of all parishes given to the secular clergy.
Inspired by Father John N. Schumacher, S.J., Luciano P.R. Santiago, in his work entitled The Filipino Clergy and the Secularization Decree of 1813, recounts the events that could be considered a presage to the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 and the subsequent public execution of Gomburza, focusing on what seemed like a long overdue secularization of the Philippine priesthood. Archbishop Santa Justa was succeeded by Archbishop Fray Juan Antonio de Orbigo y Gallego, who towards the end of his term founded the new parishes of Santa Rosa in Laguna, Irnos in Cavite, and Las Pifias in the old province of Manila. He, however, assigned the first curacy to the Dominicans and the last two to the Recollects. Native priests protested against this, but before the conflict could be resolved, the Archbishop died in 1797. This case was directly appealed to the king and was ruled in their favor with the release of a royal decree on March 3, 1803, but was shelved by the Governor General and was never implemented. A resolution proposed by Bishop-elect of Guyana, Don Jose Ventura Cabell, to secularize the parishes in his diocese was enacted into a law, the Secularization Decree of 1813. Received by Archbishop Zulaybar in Manila on December 1, 1814, it was seen as inadequate and did not agree on its implementation. The fight for secularization had gone on for many years.
An article written by Roberto Blanco entitled Pedro Palaez, Leader of the Filipino Clergy, entails a comprehensive discussion of Palaez's life and the struggle of the secular clergy for equality. It analyzes his reformist ideas and explains his work and strategy to defend the Filipino secular clergy, whose rights were being violated by the royal orders of 1848 and 1861.
Blanco discussed how Filipino priests became more conscious of the injustice and deprivation being thrown towards them, because they are Filipinos.
Along with Roberto Blanco is Albert C.A. Flores, who wrote Pedro Pelaez, Breves Apuntes sobre la Cuestión de Coratos de Filipinas, a transcription. Leading a clerical protest, Monsignor Pedro Pablo Pelaez, ecclesial governor of the church, together with Father Mariano Gomez, the parish priest of Bacoor and vicar foreign of Cavite, openly advocated the rights of the Filipino secular clergy on the administration of the parishes. This, according to Father Schumacher, are the first signs of national awakening. On March 9, 1849, a royal decree was issued that mandated the handover of the parishes of Bacoor, Cavite, Viejo or Kawit, and Silang to the Recollects, and those of Santa Cruz in Tanza, San Francisco de Malabon at General Trias, Naik and Indang to their Dominicans. This came as a surprise because these parishes are composed mostly of native Filipinos. Pelaez and Gomez wrote a petition to abolish the royal decree but ended up being published entitled El Clero Filipino in 1850 in the Madrid newspaper El Clamor Publico. Pelaez did not stop to condemn the illegality of the friars' position as parish priests because they could only do so based on the Council of Trent when there was a scarcity of secular priests, a situation that is not true to Manila at that time. Despite this, the cancellation of the royal decree was not achieved. On September 10, 1861, a royal decree was again released ordering the transfer of recollects to the parishes in the province of Cavite or others that have been served by the native priests, while the parishes in Mindanao that the recollects were to cede to the recently restored Jesuits. On the 3rd day of June 1863 marked Pelaez's unexpected death when a strong earthquake struck Manila.
Monsignor Pedro Pelaez kept the secularization movement alive. After his death, Father Jose Burgos, regarded as a protege of Pelaez, assumed leadership of the said movement. He pointed out how Filipino seculars were being denied the right to govern the parish because of their race and inferiority to Europeans. He anonymously published a pamphlet defending the memory of Pelaez and calling for justice to the Filipino clergy. Written in his manifesto is a statement explaining how this is not a matter of Filipinos being less, but a discouragement that has taken possession of the youth. He said, "What young man will still make efforts to excel in the science of law and theology if he does not see in the future anything but obscurity and indifference?" Among those who supported the secularization movement are Father Mariano Gomez and Father Jacinto Zamora.
Putting Jose Rizal in the context of the 19th century, it is our belief that friars were particularly targeted by this nationalistic movement because of their great influence over ordinary Filipinos who have not gained their education in Manila or abroad. Many continued to look up to their parish priest as a father and a fortress against the oppressive government. On a letter to Blumentritt, Rizal emphasized that God must not be used to shield their abuses nor mask religion. He said, I wanted to hit the friars since the friars are always making use of religion, not only as a shield but also as a weapon. I was therefore forced to attack their false and superstitious belief in order to combat the enemy who hid behind this religion.
Secularization for the Spaniards meant losing control over the Filipinos, and this is what they feared most. The devotion of Filipinos to their Catholic faith was used because it wasn't really about the spread of Christianity, but the Spanish colonialism and maintaining power.
One can say that in the absence of the secularization movement, we will not be able to grasp the religious environment throughout the 19th century. We were also able to understand the influence it had on Jose Rizal, that instead of becoming a priest, he was inspired to write his novels. He depicted the death of Gumburza, of Father Burgos in particular, in one of the fictionalized passages of the 8th chapter of Noli Me Tangere. There, Ibarra passed by Bagong Bayan, which is remembered as a place of death. He reminisced his memories of an old priest whose words about goodness and justice served as an inspiration. Do not forget that if wisdom is patrimony of all men, only those of good heart can inherit it. The influence of Father Burgos had on Rizal is evident on this part.
On its pages he wrote, "The Church, by refusing to degrade you, has placed in doubt the crime that has been imputed to you. The government, by surrounding your trials with mystery and shadows, causes their belief that there was some error committed in fatal moments in all the Philippines by worshipping your memory and calling you martyrs, in no sense recognizes your culpability. Insofar, therefore, as your complicity in the Cavite Mutiny is not clearly proved, as you may or may not have been patriots, and as you may or may not cherish sentiments for justice and for liberty, I have the right to dedicate my work to you as victims of the evil which you undertake to combat. And while we wait expectantly upon Spain someday to restore your good name and cease to be answerable for your death, let these pages serve as a tardy wreath of dried leaves over one who, with clear proofs, attacks your memory, stains his hands in your blood."
The sense of national identity passed on by the Gumburza and all who preceded them was transformed by Jose Rizal into a full-blown nationalism leading to the revolution. To further understand these historical events, we now move on to our next topic centralized on the events that happened during the Cavite Mutiny of 1872. Let's have a short summary on the events that happened in the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. On the 20th day of January 1872, 200 Filipino troops and workers revolted against the Spanish government after the government denied their exemption from the payment of tributes. The Cavite Mutiny has led to the persecution of secular priests, namely Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, collectively known as the Gumburza, who were allegedly tagged as the masterminds of the uprising. The priests were charged of treason and sedition by the Spanish military tribunal. It is a ruling believed to be part of a conspiracy to suppress the growing popularity of Filipino secular priests and the threat they have posed to the Spanish clergy. After a brief trial at Fort Santiago, the Gumburza were publicly executed using garrote on the early morning of February 17, 1872 at Bagong Bayan. Many scholars believed that the Cavite Mutiny was the beginning of Filipino nationalism that led to the Philippine Revolution of 1896.
The execution event. On the dawn of 17th February, almost 40,000 Filipinos from Bulacan, Pampanga, Cavite, and Laguna came to see the execution of Gumburza and the state witness Francisco Zaldua, a former artilleryman. The three priests followed Zaldua, Burgos weeping like a child, Zamora with vacant eyes, and Gomez head held high. blessing the Filipinos who knelt at his feet, heads bared and praying. He was next to die. When his confessor, a Recollect friar, exhorted him loudly to accept his fate, he replied, "Father, I know that not a leaf falls to the ground but by the will of God. Since He wills that I should die here, His holy will be done."
There are said to be two versions on what happened in the mutiny. Let us find out and analyze the two phases of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime under the reactionary governor Rafael de Izquierdo magnified the incident and used it as an excuse to clamp down Filipinos who had been calling for governmental reform. A number of Filipino intellectuals were seized and accused of complicity with the mutineers. There can as yet be no complete closure on the Cavite Mutiny since the records of the trials have not yet been found. The underlying reasons behind this rebellion may still be unclear at this point, but as we view the different perspectives in the presented comparisons of evidence, it should make it possible to come nearer to a definitive history of the mutiny. But one thing is for sure, that Cavite Mutiny is a revolutionary movement which revealed the involvement of important individuals in the history of Philippine independence.
We proceed to the Spanish perspective of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. The first one is the Jose Montero y Vidal account. According to Jose Montero y Vidal, a Spanish historian, the event was an attempt to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. Second is the official report of Governor Rafael Izquierdo. Governor Rafael Izquierdo highlighted in his claim that the event was an attempt to make Father Burgos or Zamora as the new Hari of the Philippines.
This time, let's hear the Filipino version of the incident, which they consider as a response to injustice. Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, who is a Filipino scholar and a researcher, wrote a Filipino version of the bloody incident in Cavite. Based on his writings, Filipinos had great hopes of an improvement in the affairs of the country. The friars feared that their power in the colony would soon be a complete thing of the past. Another person named Edmond Plauchot complimented Tavera's account and analyzed the motivation of the mutiny. He wrote that the arrival in Manila of General Izquierdo put a sudden end to all dreams of reforms. Such a policy must really end in a strong desire on the part of the other to repress cruelly.
The above-mentioned scholars and researchers led to a unified version of the Cavite Mutiny. Significantly, it solved contradictory accounts for the most part, resulting to important realizations. First, the revolt in Cavite was not a mere mutiny, but part of a planned separatist revolution. Second, the revolution as a whole failed because of the defection of the committed Filipino troops. Next, the planners of the revolution were Inocencio de los Reyes and Enrique Paraiso. Fourth, the immediate instigators in Cavite were Zaldua and Sergeant Francisco Lamadrid. Fifth, the three priests executed had nothing to do with the revolt. Next, the accounts stemming from Antonio Regidor, although containing many factual names and events, are not a reliable narrative of the revolt and its causes. And lastly, neither arsenal workers nor any naval personnel took part in the revolt.
The road to independence was rough and tough to toddle. Many patriots, named and unnamed, shed their bloods to attain reforms and achieve independence. June 12, 1898 may be a glorious event for us, but we should not forget that before we came across to victory, our forefathers suffered enough. As we enjoy our freedom, may we be more historically aware of our past to have a better future ahead of us. Rizal dedicated his second novel, El Filibusterismo, to their memory. I dedicate my work to you as victims of the evil which I undertake to combat. And just like what Elias said in Noli Me Tangere, may we not forget those who fell during the night.